Hey, folks, take a guess. How many plastic hand soap and cleaning bottles are thrown away each year? If you said anything less than 5 billion, you're wrong. That's enormous. If that's not bad enough, most of those containers that hold a cleaning product, 90% of that formula is water. And it makes it that much heavier to ship, which adds to climate and carbon emissions. The plastic ends up in the oceans. Those cleaners have nasty ingredients, things like chlorine and ammonia. That is a lose-lose-lose-lose situation for you and the planet. Well, Blue Land is on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet. The idea is super simple. Endlessly refillable cleaning products in a beautiful, cohesive design that looks great on your counter. All you got to do is you fill your bottles. We got one of them right over there, I think. You fill your bottles with water, drop in the tablets, wait for them to dissolve. You're never going to have to grab bulky cleaning supplies on your grocery run. You're not going to have to take up half of your apartment with laundry detergent. Refills start at just $2.25. You can even set up a subscription or buy in bulk for additional savings. And the beauty is when you buy in bulk from Blue Land, it's not that bulky. Tiny tablets. And then the water comes out of your sink. They have cleaning sprays. They have hand soap, toilet bowl cleaner, laundry tablets, more. All Blue Land products are made from clean ingredients that you can feel good about. I love this from the moment, like, I don't have to walk with this stuff from the grocery store. I don't have to store it in my apartment and take up, like I say, 1/3 of the square footage for laundry detergent and cleaning supplies. And I love it because I don't have to worry about recycling all this plastic. It's a win all around. I don't know what to tell you. And the stuff cleans great. Blue Land has a special offer for our listeners right now. Get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/majority. You don't want to miss this. Blueland.com/majority, 15% off. That's Blueland, BLUE, land.com/majority. Get 15% off. Link in the podcast and YouTube subscription. And now, time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Peter Beinart, editor-at-large at Jewish Currents, author of the Beinart Notebook on SubStack, on Palestine, Israel, Zionism, and Judaism, and probably a little bit about America. Speaking of America, the UN Security Council to vote on a ceasefire today, supposedly, with hopes of avoiding a U.S. veto. Meanwhile, Houthis reiterate they will continue attacking Red Sea shipping lanes as long as Israel's assault on Gaza continues. Biden's poll numbers hit a record low as young voters turn on Biden over Gaza and more. UN Human Rights Chief says extensive failure by Russia in protecting Ukraine civilians. Google to pay $700 million plus open up its Play App Store in a settlement of a different lawsuit than the one that we've been talking about. And different from that one we've been talking about, with 50 of the nation's state attorney generals. $148 million later, the Georgia poll workers who sued Giuliani, suing him again, this time to get him to finally shut up. HHS is pleading with 9 states to re-enroll kids on Medicaid. You can imagine what those states are. Although New Hampshire surprised me a little bit. Maybe it didn't. Texas, meanwhile, passes a law that they claim gives them power, reserved for the federal government, to arrest migrants. Lastly, EU investigates Twitter X, Twex, over both its content and advertising practices in Europe. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is
Newsday Tuesday.
Folks. Tuesday. However, we actually have a guest for most of the hour today.
Yes.
Peter Beinart. We actually pre-recorded about half an hour ago, and really interesting conversation. He's a very interesting thinker on all of this, and has been writing and talking about it for decades now. So we will get to that. First, let's tune in to which. Okay, yeah, it's number 6, right?
Mm-hmm. Or 5.
5, 6.
Oh.
We'll get to 5 is also equally disturbing.
Sorry
frankly,
about that.
Anytime you're talking about Michelle Bachmann. But you'll recall over the weekend that Donald Trump, maybe not purposely, maybe purposely, quoted Adolf Hitler in talking about immigrants poisoning the blood of our country. And I guess we don't know whether he inadvertently quoted Hitler or purposely quoted Hitler. I'm not comforted by either answer, frankly.
Either consciously quoting Hitler or just having an ideological sympathy to his ideas.
And exactly.
Those are the two options.
Increasingly, it gets harder to push back on Donald Trump doing this when the Senate and Joe Biden are working on legislation as part of their broader aid package for Ukraine and Israel that essentially demonizes, makes this country more hostile. I don't know how you want to put it, to both refugee seekers and immigrants. Nevertheless, it is different than Donald Trump using Hitler's rhetoric to discuss his immigration policy. Here is Representative Nicole Malliotakis.
Malio's stock tips, as George Santos refers to her, which is quite fun.
But that's just because she somehow has gotten used her position in Congress to make really successful stock trades.
Mm-hmm. And she's one of the New York Republicans who I would say are a little bit in jeopardy. She has Max Rose's old seat, and so part of her district is Staten Island, which is conservative. But New York Republicans overperformed because of the weakness of Kathy Hochul's candidacy. And now when 2024 comes, with abortion being on the ballot, she may be in trouble. So it's interesting to see her try to do this tap dance when trying to justify Trump's extremely racist rhetoric.
She's got one other headwind, too, beside the fact that it's a on-year election in terms of the presidential election. About a week ago, the Supreme Court in New York just decided that there can be redistricting, and it's quite possible that her district may become a little bit less favorable to her going forward. So she is in full-on panic mode, and here she is on CNN's Abby Phillips. This is her attempt to justify Trump's comments are, again, one of those things where it's like, I'm not sure justify or I'm not sure this works in the way that you think it does, but go ahead.
Simply asking, is Trump right that immigrants are poisoning the blood of this country?
Well, I don't think that's what he was saying. When he said they are poisoning, I think he was talking about the Democratic policies. I think he was talking about the open border policy. And if you look at what our mayor...
Pause it for 1 second. I just want, we should just take that in. They are poisoning the blood of our country. All right, let's just even take her at face value. Mm-hmm. The Democratic policies, the policies are poisoning our blood. Well, how would the policies about immigration poison our blood? Presumably, unless it was like something like everybody needs to, maybe she's talking about the vaccines, like that, or something to that effect. Everybody, our immigration policies that we got to poison, we got to put vaccines in there, or maybe there is a policy that we're not aware of where it's literally everybody gets a blood transfusion as part of our immigration policy. Or maybe she's saying the people we're letting in is poisoning our blood. It's an interesting defense, but go backwards and let's listen to this again.
Saying when he said they are poisoning, I think he was talking about the Democratic policies. I think he was talking about the open border policy. And if you look at what our mayor here in New York City is saying, that this migrant crisis is destroying New York City, I think it's pretty much the same thing. What we're trying to say here is that we need to have secure borders. You know what's actually poisoning America is the amount of fentanyl that's coming over our open border. And so this is a really serious issue, and I think that that's what he's talking about, that the open borders are unsafe, that it's unsustainable, and it's bankrupting cities like ours, and we need to address it.
Congresswoman, you're saying that's what you think he's saying, but he was pretty clear. He was saying that the immigrants who are coming in, he says they're poisoning the blood of the nation. He says
never said immigrants
they're doing
are poisoning, though.
He's talking about people coming in.
Can we pause actually really
just
quickly? Because I have the quote I was just looking up here, just so there's no ambiguity. Trump said, nobody knows where these people are coming from. I guess this is from a September interview. This is not from the speech. I apologize. I don't have the full quote in front of me. The article was wrong. But he said, they're poisoning the blood of our country. This is the quote. They're coming into our country from Africa, from Asia, all over the world. So this wasn't about democratic policies. It was where they are coming from, are poisoning the blood of our country. But as you say, Sam, even if you take her at face value, what he would be saying is that the Democrats are poisoning the blood of our country by allowing the people who come into the country to poison the blood of our country.
It's interesting because I think if you were to take what he literally said and assume that it was policies coming in from Africa and Asia, that would be weird. It would be weird that they did that. But I love how she's struggling. She finally lands on fentanyl and wishes she had said that earlier. They, as in fentanyl. But go ahead.
Need to address it.
Congresswoman, you're saying that's what you think he's saying, but he was pretty clear. He was saying that the immigrants who are coming in, he says they're poisoning the blood of the nation. He says
never said
that
immigrants
they're doing
are poisoning,
it.
though.
He's talking about people coming
I
across
honestly
the
think it
border
was
in the
being.
quote. We just played it.
Yeah, and he said he didn't say the words the immigrants. I think he was talking about the Democratic policies.
He was talking about people,
okay, well, look,
not policies.
I don't.
He was talking about people.
Look, I know that some are trying to make it seem like President Trump is anti-immigrant. The reality is he was married to immigrants. He's hired immigrants. I mean, he's not.
He was talking about people coming across the border. He was saying
they're coming over the border.
He was saying that they were bringing crime. They were bringing, violence with them when they came into the country. So, will you agree that he's talking about immigrants?
Well, no, but the thing is that our open borders is unsafe and unsustainable. We know that the drug cartels are bringing in and setting up operations selling fentanyl and other drugs to the point where over 100,000 Americans have died. We know that there is crime taking place. And that's not to say that all immigrants are bad. My parents are immigrants. I represent a community full of immigrants. But what I will tell you from the immigrants that I know is that they're very upset by the lack of order that we're seeing at the border.
And look, we've talked to you actually about your background, your immigrant history. I have immigrant history
Sure.
too, so we share
all do.
that. Exactly, we all do. But let's talk for a second here about the fact that Trump continuously, repeatedly uses this rhetoric that now, maybe you could say the first time he didn't know the references, the parallels to authoritarians, he knows now. Why does he keep saying it over and over again?
Well, look, I just think he's trying to bring attention to the issue.
He's using the rhetoric of
say,
authoritarians to bring attention to this issue?
I think what the important thing is we need to pay attention to this issue. I mean, look, let's admit what's going on here in this country. We have drug cartels that are running our southern border. We have the women and children, by the way, who are coming over the border. How many of them are being raped along the journey? Doctors Without Borders even put out a report saying between Colombia and Panama, there were 400 children and women that they treated who were being raped. Every single person coming over that border is paying the drug cartels thousands of dollars to get here. What are they doing with that money? They are in turn selling drugs, the drug cartels.
All right. Just some statistics that maybe you'd be interested in. United States citizens comprised 86% of fentanyl trafficking convictions in 2021. We don't have updated numbers beyond that. More than 96% of fentanyl seizures along the border since the start of the fiscal year 2023 have been at legal U.S. ports of entry.
Yep.
That means that people legally trying to enter the country are trying to smuggle in fentanyl.
And, okay, so Trump hired immigrants. So he must love them. I mean, that's typically how people show their solidarity with marginalized groups, is that they employ them. And in Trump's case, often they will steal their wages or not pay certain people. But putting that aside for a second, Trump married an immigrant, okay, but she was the kind of immigrant and the complexion of immigrant that he might agree with. Malliotakis is an immigrant herself. Well, her complexion, under Trump's estimation, or most of the people that vote for him, that would be fine. Because in the quote, Trump refers to those who are poisoning the blood of our country as those coming from Africa and from Asia specifically, and not just, as he said in the comments, the countries that you think of in South America or whatever. Do we have the clip of Trump so we could just put that full context there? Because,
yeah, let's put this up.
Yeah, there's no ambiguity. It's amazing to me that she didn't go into this, as I said, to start, understanding that she's in a precarious position in a blue state with any other freaking idea of how she was going to combat this Nazi rhetoric from Trump.
And what's also, I mean, you're on CNN. You have the ability to pull video clips, probably from CNN. If not, you could find it with Newsmax. Here is that clip. Not to give producers at CNN a little lesson on how they should do their job, but this is easy stuff.
They've destroyed our country, and we're going to make it great again, greater than ever before. And there's nothing I can do that's going to top that. I've had plenty of the other life, right? We've had plenty of the other life. We got a lot of work to do. When they I think the real number is 15, 16 million people into our country. When they do that, we got a lot of work to do. They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison mental institutions and prisons all over the world, not just in South America, not just the 3 or 4 countries that we think about, but all over the world. They're coming into our country from Africa, from Asia, all over the world. They're pouring into our country. Nobody's even looking at them. They just come in. The crime is going to be tremendous. All
right. I think he's clearly talking about policies come pouring in from all around the world. Policies come in. Mm-hmm. And those policies come in and then
poison the blood of our
America.
Country. Yeah.
It's so much paper.
Yeah. Or the fentanyl. It's funny that he goes through all of those things and doesn't say fentanyl.
It is weird.
He's just talking about people.
It's implied.
Yep. Good luck, Malliotakis. I mean, and frankly,
campaign ad.
We're going to be
that
seeing
appearance.
This,
campaign ad.
Hopefully, we're going to be seeing, more of the media, and then at one point the New York congressional delegation, I imagine some from California as well, and a couple other places, are just not going to go on television anymore. Because increasingly, hopefully, they'll be, asked whether or not they support the rhetoric and the plans of Donald Trump. And they should be held to account for the leadership and the direction of their party. Just as Democrats should be on theirs. But we shall see. First, a couple of words from our sponsors, and then we will be talking to Peter Beinart. Folks, you can think of various things in history, brilliant duos who have made a large leap forward. I'm not going to necessarily include us, but we could.
I mean, you should.
Then, of course, there's Socrates and Plato, right?
Chumps.
What do you got? Watson and Crick, hypothesis and conclusion are different examples. What about the perfect duo when it comes to growing your business? Well, that's you, of course, and Shopify. I'd even say it's a trio. It's you, your products, and Shopify, but we can keep it simple because Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. That is the key thing about Shopify. It works for tiny little enterprises like ours, our merch store. But then who knows? Maybe one day, I think we're about to come out with some posit collars.
Oh, that would be cool.
Right? Dog collars?
Yeah. Pause your barking.
Even Dave from Jamaica is looking at that going, maybe. And and then who knows how big our store could grow. But as long as we have Shopify, we can scale up. It goes from the launch your online shop stage to the first real life store stage, all the way to did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify is there to help you grow. Doesn't matter. You could be selling merch. You could be selling scented soap. You could be selling outdoor outfits. It doesn't matter. The thing about Shopify, it helps you sell everywhere. They have it's an all-in-one e-commerce platform that allows you to do in-person point of sale system, point of sales, or across all social media platforms. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. So you don't lose people in the course of I'm trying to buy this. This is a pain in the butt. Oh wait, I gotta go. I gotta go take the food out of the oven type of thing, and then you forget about it. Plus, you can sell more with less thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the United States. And Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds and Rothy's and million other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way because businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/majority, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/majority now. Grow your business no matter what stage you are in. Shopify.com/majority. Also, today's show sponsored by a company puts out about, half my wardrobe now. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone has stepped up. Rhone is something they call the commuter collection. It is the most comfortable, the most breathable, the most flexible in terms of ironing and care of products known to man. And here is why. They've got this commuter collection. The shirts are made of sports tech material. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like a high-end athletic wear, but it looks like dress clothes.
And it looks like dress clothes, and it wears like dress clothes. They have pants, they have dress shirts, they have quarter zips and polos, and actually, I have now basically as a suit. Bought the jacket and the pants separate. having the jacket taken in just a little bit in the back because I'm broad-shouldered, but I'm not, around the waist. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
It's got 4-way stretch. I said that. Breathability, flexibility. You can go to multiple functions in a day, and I've done that once or twice, not very often. And it can look great, and as you travel, it travels with ease. It has wrinkle release. I don't know. I guess you could call it technology. You don't have to iron it. You take it out, hang it up, more or less wrinkle-free. You start to wear it. 2 minutes later, there's no wrinkles. It's super easy. Plus, they have this Gold Fusion anti-odor technology. You're going to be smelling fresh and clean all day. And on top of that, Roan is, like I say, 100% machine washable. So you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. I don't know what to say. I love this stuff. I got the pants. I got the shirts, particularly the button-down shirts are just sort of a revelation to me. And the sport coat. I look good. I can, when I clean up, I can look good. The commuter collection get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to roan.com/Majority Report. Use the promo code Majority Report. Save 20% off your entire order. That's Roan, RHONE.com/Majority Report. Use the code Majority Report. It is time to find your corner office comfort. 20% off. We will leave the links in the podcast and YouTube description. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come right back with Peter Beinart. Peter Beinart, editor-at-large, Jewish Currents, author of the Beinart Notebook on Substack. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. It's a real pleasure to welcome to the program Peter Beinart. He is the editor-at-large of Jewish Currents, author of the Beinart Notebook on Substack, and professor at the CUNY School of Journalism, journalism and politics professor. Peter, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Full disclosure, I should also say that I am a subscriber to the Beinart Notebook, and appreciate your being here because I get the sense that you were trying to go on vacation the past couple of weeks. But
tomorrow starts tomorrow.
You need it.
All right.
You need it, I think, after
we all do.
many cable hits you're doing, and then also Jewish Currents is essential reading, I think, right now in this moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's start. I mean, Em and I were talking about this beforehand. You've written a piece in Jewish Currents about the sort of, I don't know, the second or third order issue that's going on in the country as we talk about what's happening with Israel and Gaza. And to some extent, that is the fact that it's something that we're talking about, but it is second or third order is by design. But so before we get there,
Yes.
Let's take first order stuff first. Yes. I'd like your perspective on what you think that we have seen over the past couple of months. And, I'm particularly in the back of my head is a piece that Daniel Levy and Tony Karan wrote. And I don't have it in my notes exactly where it was, but I think it may have been The Nation, but it was comparing what Hamas has done in some ways to the Tet Offensive in a very loose way, specifically the idea that Hamas's strategy could be, this is obviously just analysis and speculation, a political strategy. And they're having won this war is less a function of the material implications of it, but more so how it has changed the politics associated with the struggle for Palestinian liberation.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Daniel and Tony's. I think I would favor a different analogy. I would analogize October 7th to the First Intifada. Now, it's different in one very fundamental way, which was that the First Intifada was mostly stone throwing and had a lot of nonviolence. And the October 7th was kind of horrifying attack that killed many, many civilians, including the elderly and the women, and kind of, I think, really deeply immoral. But it was like the First Intifada in this sense. For 20 years, from 1967 until 1987, after Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza and was controlling millions of Palestinians who lacked basic rights, Israel thought it could manage the problem. And then the first Intifada showed it couldn't, and so there had to be a new kind of way of responding to this, which led to the Oslo peace process, which failed to create a Palestinian state. Israel had since about, I would say, really about 2005, which was the end of the second Intifada. I think Israel had gotten into another mode of thinking it could manage all these people who lacked basic rights. It wasn't offering them a state. It wasn't offering them equality and citizenship in Israel. It was basically going to say, we're going to manage their oppression, and things are going to be relatively quiet for us. They're going to be occasional. There are going to be some rockets lobbed from Gaza. We're going to go and bomb Gaza, and it's going to be hard, and we're going to hold them under blockade, and it's sustainable. And we're going to focus on other things. We're going to make peace with the Saudis. We're going to be a startup nation. We're going to do all these things. What I thought October 7th showed is that that's no longer possible. And then the question of what are the options on the table? There's one option, which is nowhere in Israel political discourse, would be the idea that since you've created one state under Israeli control, you should actually treat everyone equally in that state. But that has no political support among Jewish Israelis. The idea of the Biden administration is that you should revive the idea of a two-state solution. Also, frankly, not very much support among Israelis and maybe not possible. But the third option, which I fear we are seeing to some degree, is the idea that you can essentially start some kind of process of ethnic cleansing in which the Palestinians will be less of a problem because there's simply not as many of them around. And I think there are forces in the Israeli government that would like to do that. And the only reason, frankly, that it's not the main reason it's not been happening in Gaza is the Egyptians so far won't allow it.
Well, I mean, I think that's been stated basically explicitly by the Netanyahu government that they do not believe in the viability of a two-state solution. I've said before, I think the most humane and realistic path forward is one equal state with full political rights for all. But as you say, I mean, that's not even being discussed right now in Israeli society. Some on the Israeli left seem to be saying, like, okay, maybe we can revive a two-state solution. But Netanyahu is publicly saying, oh, no, I am proud to have prevented a Palestinian state, because look at the barbarism that they that is fundamental to their society, I guess. So, yes. I mean, when we're talking about paths forward, the Biden administration seems to think, and they're putting it out there, little breadcrumbs, that Netanyahu getting ousted, which we now know is inevitable once the war, the bombardment of Gaza ends, they see that as a more viable political solution towards peace. But what is your sense, Peter, of the alternates, the other kinds of forces that would come into play if Netanyahu would be out? Because if Benny Gantz just takes control, we're in the same situation we've been in.
Yes, that's exactly right. The Israeli center was is really not interested in fundamentally changing the conditions of Palestinians. Maybe it wants to manage the situation in a slightly different way, but there's not a fundamental difference. I think that, the one of the things that has to happen is Palestinians have to be given the space and the opportunity to create a legitimate politics. This has not really been allowed. The most legitimate popular Palestinian leaders like Marwan Barghouti are in jail. There are no elections that are held. And the Mahmoud Abbas doesn't want elections because he's really unpopular and authoritarian. But the U.S. and Israel don't want elections either, because although they like to kick Mahmoud Abbas around a lot, they actually fear that an election could produce some Palestinian leadership they don't like as much, or they can't control as much. I think that the PLO was supposed to be an umbrella movement for all the different political parties. So just like the kind of African National Congress was able to be a kind of capacious in representing a lot of different Black politics in South Africa, that's the role that the PLO was supposed to have. Palestinians have to be allowed to recreate a legitimate PLO and then decide for themselves essentially what the direction of the Palestinian nationalist movement. Now, of course, that's really difficult given what Hamas has done and given the fact that in the West Bank in particular, it's more popular. And that's why I think you've seen some Palestinians talking about some arrangement in which Hamas might be willing to disarm and leave and stop running Gaza in exchange for entering the PLO as a political party, because it's still going to exist. Palestinian Islamism, the Palestinian wing of the Muslim Brotherhood, is going to exist after this war. It's a reality. And so that seems to me, even though it's pretty difficult, that seems to me to beginnings of a way forward.
I mean, way forward, though, on which end? I mean, this is the thing that I find sort of intractable. Like, if we're in, your analogy in terms of like the first Intifada is that it changed the sort of the narrative that existed, and then the second Intifada also changed the narrative. The argument that Levy and Caron had made was that this was perhaps in some way also an attempt by Hamas to sort of disengage from its role as the government in Gaza, and rather to become a force that is fighting sort of untethered from what is happening on the political side. And the U.S. has been talking about Abbas in Gaza, which it seems to be would be a short-lived solution. I mean,
also ask 80, what they want.
He's 88. I mean, well, of course. I mean, but I wonder, like, it doesn't seem like there's anyone who, and certainly the Palestinians at this point don't, are dealing with bombardment and attack and death. So they're not thinking about this, but it doesn't seem like there is any player here who has contemplated what is next at all.
Right. Well, look, I don't think that Americans or Israelis can tell Palestinians what their liberation struggle's goal is going to be. For a long time, it was one state they called a secular democratic Palestine. Over the course of the 1970s and 80s, the PLO moved to accepting partition. Now partition has probably become impossible. So Palestinians need to have that conversation. But what I think the critical role for the U.S. is essentially to show Palestinians that if they resist their oppression in a way that conforms to international law and is ethical, that we will support it. Because one of the things that has made Hamas more successful is the fact that the United States has relentlessly defeated and opposed and shut down what I would call ethical Palestinian resistance to oppression. We have, every time the Palestinians have gone to the United Nations or the International Criminal Court, we supposedly are the great defenders of the liberal international order. We want to use the International Criminal Court to punish the Russians. But literally, when the Palestinians try to use these mechanisms that we supposedly believe in, we literally talk about defunding the International Criminal Court. When we say, why don't you produce Palestinian Gandhis? And then when they create a boycott, divestment, sanction, you don't have to agree with every aspect of BDS. But if you basically want to try to criminalize the same method that we celebrated when the civil rights movement did it, when the South Africans did it, then what message are you sending to Palestinians? You are sending the message to Palestinians that the only thing that Israel and the United States recognize is force, that violence is the only language we understand. And in fact, Hamas has repeatedly, and Hezbollah, have repeatedly told Palestinians, you know what? We deliver for you. Those other guys don't. Mahmoud Abbas has essentially even tried a collaborationist strategy. He said, you know what we'll do? We'll work with you to make sure that you can oppress us with no low cost to you in the hopes that we will win your trust so you give us a state. Salam Fayyad was beloved by Israeli and American politicians. And when he left, because he was the master of that strategy, and when he left Palestinian politics, he said, Israel made me, I'm paraphrasing, Israel made me look like a chump because I couldn't stop settlement growth for one day and we were moving further and further away from the state. The Hamas says, you know who's got Palestinian prisoners out of jail, which is a huge issue among Palestinians? We did. Not Mahmoud Abbas. Who got Israel out of southern Lebanon? Hezbollah with their rockets, right? So we can't decide what course Palestinian politics is going to take, but we can send a message to Palestinians about what works. And we have actually been sending exactly the opposite message.
Yeah, I mean, I think Israel, part of their strategy in dividing the Palestinian body politic was to allow Hamas to get away with some stuff that they wouldn't allow Fatah to do in the West Bank, and nurtured and allowed for money to pour in ways that were clearly to create a sort of like an interesting battle. They could do the opposite, but it doesn't seem like, I mean, you talk about, I've seen you reference, many times, revealed preference in terms of, particularly in terms of the United States. Because we have now, I don't know, we're on sternly lettered word letter, sternly worded letter number 5 from Anthony Blinken about civilian casualties. How much of what do you think is happening? And I should also say, as we're talking, I recall now, I think it was a 2020 piece that you wrote about Joe Biden's relationship, troubling relationship in terms of Israel. How much of what we are seeing is just pure ideology from the U.S., from the Biden administration, maybe even just Biden himself? Yes. And how much of it is somewhat strategic? Because it seems like he has no awareness of what is going on the ground.
Israel in the United States is not really a foreign policy issue. It's in large measure an identity issue. And that is because Israel's founding myths are very similar to America's founding myths. One of the things that historians of the 19th century note is that the closer that American settlers were to the Indian frontier, the more likely they were to give their towns Old Testament names. Right. So that's why when my kids go to Jewish day school, so they have a familiarity with the Hebrew Bible. So when we were driving around the kids, they were constantly noticing the names of small towns in America that come from Tanakh, from the Hebrew Bible. America and Israel were both founded as promised lands on a hostile frontier. Right. So if you want to know how an American feels about Israel, just ask them how they feel about America's founding myths. The Americans who are most invested in those founding myths are the most pro-Israel. In fact, they see Israel in many ways, the Republicans, as a better version of America because it's more religious. It has clearer hierarchies. It has a stronger border policy. If you want to ask an American what they think of the 1619 Project, and you'll know what they think about Israel-Palestine, right? And so I think fundamentally the issue for Joe Biden, I think, is that much less than someone like Barack Obama or others in the Democratic Party, he is not really comfortable challenging these myths about America. And therefore, he doesn't really, I don't think he has a real understanding or real empathy of the Palestinian struggle. The Palestinian struggle is very threatening for Americans, in large measure, I think in part because if Americans were to become more conscious about it and they would think about a challenge to settler colonialism in Israel-Palestine, they might think about the fact that actually that challenge is very uncomfortable for us. Right. I think that's at the root a lot of this.
It has always been my contention that the inverse is also true, that in founding Israel and in dealing with the question of settler colonialism and what will we do with the Palestinians, that they looked to America and said, well, Americans got away with it.
You don't have a leg to stand on.
And that, it was just a question of we were just 100 years too late in terms of where society has progressed in terms of what we think about these things.
100%. So white South Africans said exactly the same thing, right? We haven't been as successful as you. And so in some ways, one way you could think about what's happening now is the question is it possible to do in the 21st century what it was possible to do hundreds of years ago, which is essentially a referendum on human moral progress, right?
Right.
Do we have this arc of history that Martin Luther King and Barack Obama like to talk about, or is that just an illusion? And I think that's part of what's at stake in this moment.
Well, let's talk about, because I think Joe Biden is going to be the last Democratic president to have this type of position. I just don't think that I think the writing has been on the wall. When Tim Kaine didn't, refuse to go to see Netanyahu speak, however many years ago that was, I was like, we're heading into a different era in terms of American politics. Yes. With that said, let's turn to this question that you wrote about in Jewish Currents. It was more specifically about the universities, but that's where what's on the stage today. You've written that this question of equating anti-Zionism or critique of Israel with anti-Semitism is not necessarily a conspiracy, I think you wrote, but a certainly aligned interest in avoiding certain conversations in certain areas in this country. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's among young people that this sense of identification with Palestine, right, and that word I think has taken on a particular centrality, is strongest, right? And these are the same kinds of people that would have been in the streets fighting against apartheid in the 1980s or fighting Vietnam. Right? I mean, we've seen these kind of moments before where some kind of issue around the world becomes part of American progressive identity, because it says it has a reflection of kind of what we're struggling for in the United States. We're in a death battle here for the question of whether this is going to be an ethno state or whether it's going to be a state that tries to create equality under the law. And so people who are invested on the other side of this look at universities, especially elite universities, the universities they may have gone to, and they're really scared because they think these guys are going to be the next leaders of America. And I think tragically and unfortunately for a certain group of people in the American Jewish establishment, it is imagined as essentially these were institutions where we felt comfortable. These were our institutions. We felt so proud of our role in these institutions as part of our success in America. And now they're being taken from us. Now we're becoming marginalized. Now we're becoming hated, right? And the problem is what we need to remember, and I'm going to, is the kind of things that people like, you might be surprised to hear me, like Barry Weiss and Bret Stephens used to say, right? They used to say this, they would say, there's nothing wrong with being uncomfortable at a university because people say things that are intellectually challenging to the points of view that you were raised with, right? That was the message to Black people. That's the message to LGBT people, right? That physical threats and harassment are one thing, and they're wrong and they're intolerable, but that intellectual discomfort is part of learning, right? So. But when it comes to Jewish kids, right, the message is exactly the opposite, right? The message is if you are hearing things at universities that are scary and difficult for you because they really threaten the notion of Israel that you were raised with, then what we need to do is shut that speech down, right? And that's crazy. The answer should be that the American Jewish community has failed in our institutions, in our synagogues, in our Hebrew schools, in our Jewish day schools, in our camp. We have failed in that educational process because a lot of Jewish kids don't grow up with any actual interaction with Palestinians, never read a book by a Palestinian or seen a film by a Palestinian. So yeah, they're threatened when they hear Israel called an apartheid, settler, colonial, blah, blah, blah. But that's because they haven't actually had to engage with those issues, and we should encourage them to engage with those issues. And the irony is, then I'll stop, is that you have some American Jewish kids on the left who actually have undergone that process. And the process of transformation actually comes quite quickly, right? And they're with the pro-Palestinian protesters. And so then when you want to shut that protest down, you end up actually shutting those Jewish kids on the left down too, right? So their safety evidently doesn't matter so much. You can ban a Jewish Voice for Peace chapter at Columbia or suspend it, and no one says that's actually harming Jewish students.
Well, they're an inconvenient truth, I would say, or they're an inconvenience for like the Israeli project. And just to ask you a little bit more about the generational divide here, there was a poll that came out in the New York Times today about which side in the conflict between Israel and Palestinians do folks sympathize with more. And you're seeing just a complete sea change in people under the age of 29 in their sympathy with the Palestinian people. But that also falls along racial lines to a certain degree, where Black and Hispanic people tend to be more sympathetic with the Palestinian cause. Yes. What's your assessment of that?
I think, again, it goes back to these questions of America's founding myths and one's relationship to those things, right? If Ta-Nehisi Coates had this really remarkable line, and his entrance into this conversation itself is very telling, right? Ta-Nehisi Coates said, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East in exactly the same way that America is the oldest democracy in the world, right? So if you can say, if you raise your eyebrow when someone says that America is the oldest democracy in the world because you recognize that it wasn't a democracy for people like you, right? You will probably have exactly the same reaction when people say that about Israel. And that's what we're seeing. Now, unfortunately, in American foreign policy discussions, Black people, Hispanic people tend to be very underrepresented, right? So the American foreign policy discourse remains very, very, very white, which is why I think that these kind of this discourse that we're seeing isn't very well reflected in kind of establishment foreign policy discourse. But I think that's the reason for this shift. And people often say, what do these kids know about? The truth is that we all work by analogy. It's hardwired into us to work by analogy. And the analogies for people who have had family experiences of either colonialism or segregation, just being in a situation where they weren't treated equally to other people because of their race or their religion or ethnicity, at a deep level, they see a connection when they see that millions of Palestinians simply live under the control of a state that doesn't treat them equally.
I want to I couldn't help but just put an asterisk around the Barry Weiss thing, because before she was doing that, she was also at Columbia doing exactly what she's doing now. So I just needed to say that. But
no. I totally agree. There was unfortunately, there was
she's
never
had many turns.
willingness
She's had
to
many
apply
turns
this to Israel as well.
But speaking about that notion, that concept of Jews, some Jews feeling uncomfortable on college campuses. There was just a piece in the Times that was ostensibly about that. There was one paragraph that just stood out to me. In interviews, many Jewish members of the Harvard community described their growing estrangement from campus. Protesters have disrupted lectures, shouting through bullhorns that the war in Gaza was genocide. Anti-Semitic messages have been posted on social media. I think there was one. I had this in high school growing up. Some students have decided to check their Zionist beliefs in the classroom and in the residence hall. A few have traded their kippahs or skull caps for baseball hats. For students who are feeling increasingly isolated, it did not help that many of their Jewish peers had joined the pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Oops. Like, the entire piece is written from the perspective of a certain unnamed, unnumbered amount of Jewish students, and we don't have a sense of where the bulk of Jewish students are on this, and whether this is really an issue about Jews feeling uncomfortable what's going on there. Clearly there's anti-Semitism is on the rise. It was on the rise, I think, prior to this. Certainly this exacerbates it in some circles, but it is implicit almost in the construction of this piece that being critical of Israel is being anti-Jewish, despite the fact that much of this is coming from Jews as well.
Right. And I think this is partly generational, because I think among Jews who are older, the percentage of Jews who might actually question Zionism is really small, right? So you can feel like you are among a consensus. But among younger American Jews, there's a real division. I don't think we know, we have polling which suggests that maybe something of close to 40, maybe 40% of the youngest American Jews, maybe somewhere between a third and 40%, basically see Israel as an apartheid state, right? So it may not be a majority, but it's a large minority. And on some of these campuses, it could be a majority, depending on the nature of the campuses, right? So I don't think there's a willingness among some older American Jews to recognize to what degree this is a kind of ideological civil war among young Jews. Again, I don't want to suggest that all young Jews are in that place. They're not, but a lot of them are. The second thing is that we do have a lot of data which suggests that when there's more violence between Israel and the Palestinians, and especially when Israel kills more Palestinians, there's a rise in reported anti-Semitic attacks. There are academic studies from Australia, from Belgium, from the United States, which show a very clear correlation here, right? And I think we need to think about what's happening. I think one hypothesis that's happening is that there are people who are enraged by what Israel is doing, and wrongly, some of those people are taking out their anger and hostility on Jews. They're saying that Jews or Jewish institutions are to blame for, and that's wrong. People have to make a very clear distinction between Israel as a state and Jewish people or Jewish institutions, just like it would be wrong to blame a Muslim person for what Saudi Arabia or Pakistan was doing, right? But if we demand that people make that clear distinction, then the Jewish community also has to make that clear distinction.
Yes.
If you say that
and Joe Biden
is inherent in being Jewish, you are actually creating an environment in which it's more likely that Jewish people are going to be held responsible, and they should not be. If you want to be a Zionist, terrific. I mean, I might have my criticisms, but it's a choice you make. And we need to recognize that that is a choice. It's not an inherent part of being Jewish. There are lots and lots of ways of being Jewish, and Judaism was around for a long time before there even was political Zionism.
Well, I mean, this is what Netanyahu wants, right? This is what the far-right extremist government of Israel wants. They want to use the Jewish diaspora, honestly, as human shields for the crimes that they are committing in Gaza, to essentially say, we are going to make Zionism equal Judaism as a way to stave off the criticism of the fact that we've killed 20,000 people in 10 weeks with indiscriminate killings and bombings. And that is the thing that I feel doesn't necessarily get talked about enough, is how, honestly, the Netanyahu government exploits anti-Semitic anxiety in order to run cover for its crimes. And that foments, in my opinion, anti-Semitism because of that false connection.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to suggest that even Benjamin Netanyahu is happy when Jewish people are beaten up in the diaspora, but I think it's deeper than Netanyahu. The entire contention of Zionism from the beginning has been that Jews could not be safe in a diaspora. They could never be fully actualized in diaspora. And so in a way, America has always been a great kind of ideological threat to Zionism, because America has been a place always where is generally been a place where Jews did not face a lot of discrimination. We were never the quintessential other in America. And in today, the fact that most Jews live in liberal democracies, whether it's Australia or Canada or Britain or France, and are living relatively safe and equal lives, in a certain kind of way, is a threat to the whole idea of Zionism, right? Which is that the safest place for Jews is Israel. But Israel's not necessarily actually the safest place for Jews. And so in a way, again, I don't want to suggest that even Benjamin Netanyahu is celebrating anti-Semitism, but there is a precondition in that mentality to look for validation towards the idea that Jews are not safe anywhere other than Israel. And tragically, it is also the case that Israel's actions vis-a-vis the Palestinians tend to lead to greater degrees of anti-Semitism. Not to say that anyone is fundamentally to blame other than the anti-Semite itself, but that it does produce this response.
I'm curious as to, because I imagine that you spend a lot of time engaged in this conversation with other Jews who are who have issue with your perspective on these. Certainly, this conversation is in my personal life, and in, I think maybe all of ours, but certainly around family members. I have been pointing to the fact that one of the fundamental building blocks of Zionism was that argument that fundamentally Jews cannot be safe without the existence of an Israel, and that Israel was founded at least largely in part as a safe haven for Jews. Yet here we are, 75 years out from the Holocaust, and my Jewish education consisted of Holocaust, Israel, then maybe Hebrew and Jewish culture in that order. And, I was 30 years out from the, I'm in first grade and 30 years out from the Holocaust. I mean, that was the order of things at that time. But 75 years out from the Holocaust, we have the greatest attack on Jews since then. It seems to me like this question of fundamentally, has this version of Zionism, assuming that there were other versions that maybe Buber or Hannah Arendt had promoted, but this this version, this road taken, whenever that road was taken in the context of Israel, has failed in one of its fundamental primary objectives. And I've had conversations with people in Israel like, we're much safer in Israel than you are in America. I hear these things about what's happening in colleges, and we go to the bomb shelter 4 times a day, but it's just like a course of things. And I'm like, do you not hear what you're saying?
Right. No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's funny. I remember having this conversation with a Palestinian guy I know in Atlanta, and he was telling me how he would watch these Orthodox Jews in Atlanta walking to walking to synagogue on Shabbat, and he said, if they had been where my family is in the West Bank, they would have been armed, or they would have had people with arms around them, right? And so, yes, I think, look, at the most fundamental level, I think that if you hold millions of people without basic rights, you are inflicting tremendous amount of violence upon them, right? Now, often that violence goes unnoticed because it becomes it's so structural, it's so obvious that in some ways people kind of ignore it if they're not suffering it. But these are systems of tremendous violence. And when you impose tremendous violence on people, you are also going to bring violence upon yourself. That doesn't mean I justify Palestinian acts of violence against Israeli civilians, not at all. But that's what happens. That's why the IRA was blowing up department stores in London. It's why the ANC created a military wing in 1961. Nelson Mandela was not a believer in nonviolence. He was a believer in armed resistance, right? And white South Africans believed overwhelmingly that if they gave up their supremacist state, then black people would just kill them because they'd be defenseless, right? Instead, what happened was that Mkhonto we Sizwe, the military, the wing of the ANC, had no reason to exist anymore because black people had the vote, right? Because most people, the vast majority of people, would like the government to be able to advocate for their rights peacefully through a political system in which they have representation. And that's also why the IRA stopped blowing up things in London. Now, people think that I'm insane and unbelievably dangerously naive when I say that I believe that process could happen in Israel, Palestine too. But you know who I find does not tend to think that I'm naive when I say this? Palestinians, right? I have almost yet to hear a Palestinian say that they think this is absurd and naive. I hear in my Jewish community from Israeli Jews and American Jews constantly that basically this is not the way the Middle East works. I don't understand Palestinians. I don't all this stuff. I think that actually political science research shows that in deeply divided societies, those societies are more peaceful when everyone has a voice in government. And what would have happened if America had never given black people the vote in the 1960s? What would have been the trajectory of violence that we would have seen in the United States? I think we can imagine what would have happened, right? That's in some ways what Martin Luther King was saying to America. He was saying, if you don't give us the vote, so that we have the ability to advocate as still profoundly flawed as it is, things would have been a hell of a lot more dangerous for white Americans if that not had happened. And I think that's how I see Israel-Palestine as well.
I can't help but think, and I've had this similar experience, the idea that there would be Jews surrounded by Muslims, all the Jews will be dead, to be a sort of a learned condition of racism.
Yes.
I mean, and that the irony is that in the, attempting to pursue the Abraham Accords, which, I think in many respects created the urgency for Hamas in some respects. I mean, I don't know the internal workings, but it seems logical that it would have created an urgency that you're not going to put us on this reservation and we're not going to be part of this. But the same people who promote the Abrams Accord must acknowledge that those accords are made with Muslims. So the idea that there's something essential about the Jewish-Muslim dynamic that is impossible is absurd. We've seen, and aside from the fact that prior to 1948 or 47 or the late 40s, you had Jews living amongst Arab countries, with more or less of the same problems that they had in Christian ones.
Avi Shlaim wrote about this, right, in his books as his experiences as an Arab Jew.
Growing up in Iraq. Yes. I mean, again, not to say that those situations were always simple or easy or Jews had full equality, but actually they were better than in Christian countries. I mean, I think the reason people like the Abraham Accords is they are a way of Israel getting legitimacy, right, without Israel having to deal with with denying Palestinians basic rights. And so there was this idea that you could kind of just ignore the Palestinians. So they were just another group of Arabs and not even a very important one, right? And so you could go to the really important Arabs and Muslims and you have a good relationship with them. I think that, fundamentally, I think your point about racism, Sam, is really, really right. There's a very, very deep racism which is so embedded in the discourse in Israel, among Israeli Jews, and also among diaspora Jews like us, that it's almost unconscious. And like one way to recognize that is that we don't even have a term really for anti-Palestinian bigotry, right? We might talk about Islamophobia, but we talk about anti-Semitism all the time. Imagine if we were to say that people who were anti-Palestinian bigots shouldn't have a legitimate role in our public discourse. Then barely anyone in Congress would be allowed, because they're all anti-Palestinian bigots. They all are totally fine, if not downright ecstatic, about the fact that millions of Palestinians have fewer political rights than a black person in Mississippi in 1953, because they're not even citizens of the country in which they live, the government that controls their lives. And so it's so accepted that people don't even, I think it's just the water in which we swim.
Is Zionism inherently a racist ideology?
So I believe that there were alternative strands of Zionism, of non-statist Zionism, cultural Zionism, which I find attractive, which basically imagined the importance of a Jewish culture in historic Palestine, the revival of Hebrew as a living language. Even halakhically under Jewish law, there are certain commandments that can only be done in what's called Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. So people like, as Sam was saying, people like Martin Buber, Judah Magnus, at various points, Hannah Arendt, even Albert Einstein. But those people did not support a Jewish supremacist state. They supported an equal binational state. And so that kind of Zionism, that road not traveled, I think there are important lessons in it. The reason I think it's important to remember that tradition is it offers us a model of equality in which Jews don't leave. Jews stay and flourish. And not just and flourish as equal people, and also people who can have a Jewish culture, right? And that's really important. But political Zionism has always been devoted to the idea that this should be a state that serves Jews, and that in order to create such a state, you either have to kick the Palestinians out or you have to hold them down. And that, unfortunately, and even though I recognize that state has been a godsend for some people, right? I mean, the fact that there were for those Jews who were in displaced persons camps after the World War II, they weren't allowed into the United States. The United States didn't even allow Jews into the United States after the Holocaust, right? And which is one of the reasons Truman wanted a Jewish state, actually, was because he knew that he wanted to get the Jews in Germany out of the DP camps, and he wouldn't let them into the United States. I understand, and there have been people in my family for whom that was was an experience of liberation and refuge. I recognize that. But for Palestinians, it has been an experience of dispossession and racism. There's just no question about it.
People should also note that when we hear arguments as to there's plenty of Muslim countries that the Palestinians could go to, that when the question of Caucasian Jews going to America or moving to other countries at that time, that was out of the question. It was equally, it was absurd to people even in the wake of the Holocaust. Let me ask you this, and I know we've held you a little bit long, and I appreciate you're doing this, but the tenor of the Israeli sort of like body politic and just sort of the population. I mean, 20 years ago, there was, I think, like, at least when I was critical of Israel, we would talk to people on the Israeli left, and there was a sense that maybe things could go in a different direction.
Yeah.
In the wake of massive immigration from Russia in particular, and almost like a direct pipeline between there and maybe stopping off in Brooklyn in some instances, going right to the West Bank. what is your perspective on how the Israeli psyche has changed? Because, we have open, it seems to me, fascists in the Israeli government. I mean, non-controversial. Right. There's controversy as to what the word fascism means that we talk about here in America. Is Donald Trump a fascist and this and that? There are fascists in the Israeli government who I think there's nobody who could argue that they're not. I mean, in some instances, they're self-proclaimed. But what do you make of that? The nature of the Israeli population that supports such a thing?
I think part of the problem is that because we have so kind of ingrained the notion of Israel as an ethno-state, that very frequently when people use the term Israeli to talk about Israeli citizens, right, they use it as synonymous with Jewish Israeli citizens, right? And this is really relevant to the question of the Israeli left. So when people talk about the Israeli left, what they mean is Israeli Jews who supported a Palestinian state, maybe are opposed to settlements, right? But 20% of Israel's citizens, right? I'm talking about in Israel proper, not the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem. Israel's citizens are Palestinians, right? They get called Arab Israelis because that was a way of kind of imagining that they weren't really Palestinians. But they're just the Palestinians who managed to not get expelled in 1948, right? That's a larger percentage of the population than Black people are in the United States, right? So if you are thinking about what it means to have an Israeli left, they are at the core of that Israeli left because they're the people who are seeking equality, right? People who are who are on the bottom, who get discriminated against, tend to be the backbone of the left, right? So when you want to talk about reviving an Israeli left, you start there. Right. Otherwise, it's imagined like the Democratic Party is going to win without Black people. The problem is because ethno-nationalism and Jewish supremacy is so deeply embedded in Israeli politics, they've always been considered essentially, even though they can vote and have their political parties, not legitimate partners for government. If you want a really legitimate Israeli left, I think you need a genuinely Jewish and Palestinian political party based on the principle of equality. And it won't win elections, but it would have a real base of support. And the strongest base of support would be among Palestinian citizens.
I guess, and let me rephrase that, because I think, and there was certainly a question, I guess, 8-9 months ago, whether the larger protests about the sort of the authoritarianism that was being, like in the domestic authoritarianism was there. People were going to realize oh, wait a second. We can make common cause here and sort of tie together the Jewish left to the extent, or even the Jewish, center and the Israeli left. But I guess what I'm talking about is the nature of the right in Israel has moved. I mean, it's happened in this country too, but the pace and the I think person for person, it feels like the right has become a different thing in Israel. And it's become larger part of the Israeli population, and the how sort of I don't know. I mean, fascistic and authoritarian some of that right has become, I think it's striking. And I wonder how much of that do you perceive that as a function of bringing in immigrants and putting them, these are people coming out of the Soviet Union as well, which was a very different type of system and being and given their freedom, but under certain terms that I wonder what your perspective is on that.
I think it's complicated because when we say right in Israel, we really mean three different things. One of which is religion, right? A second is a view on economics, right? Socialist versus capitalist. And the third is treatment of the Palestinians. So Israel has become a more religious society. The percentage of people who are religious, ultra modern Orthodox has grown, and you see that in this government, which is the most religious government. So that's so that has views of women, LGBT. So that's one thing that means people. It's also true that Israel used to be a much more socialist country and has become a much more neoliberal country, and Benjamin Netanyahu was central in that. So that's another way. And so when people talk about going to the right, they conflate it also with the question of treatment of the Palestinians. And here I think it's not as simple as saying that this government is much more right-wing, because remember, Palestinian citizens of Israel were held under military law from Israel's creation until 1966. This was under socialist, secular, labor governments, right? The greatest expulsion of Palestinians was under was under the Labor Party at its founding. And then another big expulsion in 1967, Ben Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, they're pikers compared to that in terms of the number of Palestinians they've expelled, right? So I think the challenge is you are right that there are real fascistic currents, but I think it's also important for us to remember that this is in some ways in Israel's political DNA, and it's not necessarily that these folks are doing things that are so different than when it comes to their treatment of the Palestinians than previous Israeli governments that had a different cultural vibe to them.
And I would imagine also just things like social media and phone cameras make it also feel maybe a little bit different than it would have. Peter Beinart, editor-at-large of Jewish Currents, author of the Beinart Notebook on Substack. Again, I'm a subscriber, very happily so, and have learned a lot, and I appreciate it. Professor at CUNY School of Journalism, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Okay, folks, that's it for us today. We're going to move into the fun half. Just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only allow this show to survive and thrive, you get the free show, free of commercials. You can IM us on our app at majorityapp.com. Also, if you want to gift somebody a subscription to the Majority Report for the holidays, obviously, that's like one of those last-minute gifts that you can pretend you had been planning all along.
Right.
And then you find yourself on the, Christmas Eve with just to hop on the app, Majority app. The app, of course, is free. And you can click the link to provide a gift membership to whomever you want. Also, shop.majorityreportradio.com. We got some new merch in there. We're working on those dog collars. It's tough to source American-made dog collars and make sure that we can do it, but we're getting there. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, featuring the Majority Report blend. I mean, I don't think they would say that, but I say that.
Right.
They would say probably featuring the WTF blend. I don't really care about that, though. But they have all sorts of great blends over there. Check it out. Justcoffee.coop. Emma, ESVN.
On ESVN, we spoke about the Cowboys and their inability to really be dominant outside of being at home. We talked about the resurgence of the Bills, what really constitutes the nature of an MVP, and more. And also, I went 3-0 last weekend, so no big deal. YouTube.com/ESVN show.
Left Reckoning, do we know what's on Left Reckoning today? Tonight, right?
Yeah, there will be an episode tonight, I'm sure. So you could go to youtube.com/Left Reckoning for that. But most recently, David Griscom did a live stream, and they had Aina Muhammad on last week to discuss the intellectual dark web. So youtube.com/Left Reckoning, as well as patreon.com/Left Reckoning to access the postgame.
Folks, I'm really sorry. Yeah, Stale Nate says, listening at the DMV because my driver's license expires on my birthday, 36 today. Been listening since 28, wondering if I could get a Poker with the Boys drop to visualize my plans after I get out of here. Left is best. We're working on it, but didn't he say the battery ran out on that thing or something?
He did.
Here we go. Very close. Very close. And...
Whoop.
And
she was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Hey.
There you go. So happy birthday to you. Folks, see you in the fun half. We will we'll take calls. Not many, but we will take calls. 646-257-3920. See you there.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's.
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello? Is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go start watching.
Libertarians.
They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
Gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-501. 1/2. 3/8.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
6, 5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You can call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all,
Yeah.
my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the weak being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you, bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. These 2 clips, and then we will get to.
No,
the
we're
phones.
out. We're back.
We're back. Well, just so you know, we got 2 clips to do, and then we're getting to the phones.
Strategery.
There you go.
Peek behind the curtain.
Whoa!
These are the
People are
high-level
gonna realize
ideas.
we plan this show out sometimes.
I mean, frankly, the idea that we have gone into a fun half with an idea of what clips we want to get to, like, that's less frequent than going in and just winging it. I would say
it's 98% of the time.
Yeah, right. But why you decided you wanted to be a little more strategic today?
Well, this one, I mean, in the wake of our interview with Peter Beinart, here's what's happening just yesterday. Is it yesterday? Monday, December 17th. Okay, 18th. I just want to double check. Yesterday at TPUSA, that is Charlie Kirk's, outfit. And this is from his show, I guess, Real America's Voice. I don't even know. They have so many different taglines. And
Well, this is live from AmFest, which is the big festival.
TPUSA's AmFest
in Phoenix. But yes, he's doing his show from the big.
It's amazing because they keep regenerating the exact same thing over and over
that's
again.
what I was about to say.
But what they'll do is they'll just keep rebranding it. This is the TPUSA AmFest as opposed to the Confab and the
and in Phoenix, where apparently that was the center of Turning Point USA's focus in the 2020 elections, or started the 2022 midterms, about getting young people to vote Republican, and it was a miserable failure.
I wonder if Charlie Kirk has some deal where he's somehow evading taxes by maintaining Arizonan residence. That's what that all speaks to me about. I don't know exactly. I got to look into it. But here is for folks who are younger. You may not know who this person is, But Michelle Bachmann was a congresswoman from Minnesota. And she, in my mind, always epitomized the problem that Tea Party people had with America. And it really is, to a large extent, they still have this problem with America in terms of conservatives. The difference is that they have their own media. She gave, I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the first rebuttals to Barack Obama's State of the Union, but she didn't do so as a Republican. Barack Obama gives the State of the Union, then the way that it used to be back in the day was then the opposition party would give their rebuttal. Now we have the opposition party give the rebuttal and then multiple other versions of a rebuttal. We now have the Progressive Caucus.
Yeah, Bernie did it one time, right.
But that didn't happen until the year that Michelle Bachmann decided to give a rebuttal distinct from the Republican Party for the Tea Party. And the interesting thing about it was that it was a live direct feed to Tea Party parties going around on the country. CNN wanted a piece of this. And so they put their camera in the room too, except for she was delivering it directly to the Tea Party camera and the CNN camera was over to the right. And so for Americans who were not Tea Partiers, which is the vast majority of Americans, her speech was like this, just slightly off camera, but she was looking into this camera. And so when she would speak, she looked like she was trying to look into the camera, but couldn't. And this was the metaphor that I was using. Like, they can't talk to both groups of people at the same time. Now they don't need to. Mm-hmm. Now they have their own sort of media ecosphere and they only talk to their own people. And so they can go on and say bat crap crazy stuff like Michelle Bachmann does here with Charlie Kirk.
So all the good neighbor, all the money, Israel supplies all of the electricity, all of the water in Gaza, everything they've done for them was turned around and used against Israel.
Pause it for 1 second. Just to be clear, they control the water. They control the electricity. They prevent Palestinians in Gaza from building their own water treatment facilities. They prevent Palestinians in Gaza from building their own power plants. But just so you know, it's not just a neighborly thing.
Before October 7th, before this latest indiscriminate bombardment, 9 in 10 people in Gaza did not have access to clean water.
Continue.
Used to defeat them, used to kill them. And one thing I saw is that whether you live in the north or the south of Israel, whether you're religious or secular, everyone agreed and united. We can no longer embrace this being Mr. Nice Guy to the people who are in Gaza, because this is over 1,000 years of mothers teaching their children, grow up and kill Jews. Grow up and kill Jews. It's the mindset.
Can you pause it? I'm sorry. This is also a lie. Over 1,000 years, again, the nation of Israel is less than 100 years old, okay? And before that period, when you talk about the people that lived in the region and you read the work of someone like Avi Shlaim, who was an Arab Jew, there were multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious communities where people lived together at that point. This is a racist trope where evangelical Christian Zionists like Michelle Bachmann want to make it about a clash of civilizations between the brown people in Palestine and in the Arab world and the white civilized folks who are the Christians like herself and the white Jews in Israel. So it's not over 1,000 years, but keep going.
So what connects all this together, everybody, is that evil people and evil organizations, they take advantage of our fake God of tolerance.
That's right.
And they say, oh, these people are so stupid because they want to be tolerant. And they come in and they rape our girls and they kill us. And then they go and they kill a bunch of Jews in Israel. Maybe we shouldn't be so tolerant.
Well, and maybe our President Biden should learn what the truth is of what's going on in Gaza versus what's going on in Israel. So can you imagine? He handed a check for $100 million of our money just a couple of weeks after they slit the throats of Israelis. He's not willing to sign $14 billion to help the Israelis. The money is flowing in for Gaza. All the money is coming in.
I mean, it's just the cascading lies. He's begging the Congress to do the $14 billion. Now, I happen to be one of those people who think that aid should be leveraged, but he's begging just in terms of just like what's actually happening. It is the Republican Party that is not passing these things. It's just it's fascinating.
And they are whining and bitching about the money that's going to Ukraine, and that has been central to a lot of the Republicans for quite a while, and yet they are just completely besides themselves, desiring to send more of the taxpayer money to Israel.
In from Iran. And that's what the people of Gaza are. They're basically hired mercenaries. That is their industry. Terrorism is their industry. That's why you have more miles of tunnels, Charlie, than you have the New York subway. Because they have one industry in Gaza, and that's terrorism. So it's time that Gaza ends. The 2 million people who live there, they are clever assassins. They need to be removed from that land. That land needs to be turned into a national park. And since they're the voluntary mercenaries for Iran, they need to be dropped on the doorstep of Iran. Let Iran deal with those people.
Michelle Bachmann, everybody, she does a great job, doesn't she?
Oh, my God.
And I got to be honest, I look at Israel, and Israel says, we never want another person into our country that doesn't share our values. They said they don't want refugees. They don't want any of these people.
What a concept.
I want American immigration policy to be like that.
Yes.
I want American immigration policy to be the Israeli immigration. Big walls, lots of deportations, and no people that hate us. Michelle?
And lots of happiness.
And lots of joy and shalom and peace and happiness. If you hate us, get the hell out of America.
I don't know.
Michelle.
I mean,
that's what Peter Beinart just spoke to us about, which is about how Americans, the American founding myth is quite similar to the Israeli one of being a nation of prosperity on hostile land. I'm paraphrasing a little bit what Peter told us, but you can see like the ultra nationalists in the United States and also religious fundamentalists like Michelle Bachmann, why they feel such a fealty to the Israel project. Like they love the idea that the border is so militarized in Israel, and that if there is any kind of incursion, that they get to summarily execute anybody. Before, obviously, October 7th, they were doing that to Palestinians. And they love the idea of creating a second-class citizenry of people that are of a different ethnicity. So that's...
Dan from Columbus asked, they need to be removed from the land. Did you advocate for ethnic cleansing, Michelle? Oh, yeah. I don't think that she would hesitate to say, oh, yes, that's exactly what I'm advocating for. And Charlie Kirk, sat there, and she does a great job, doesn't she, folks? She does a great job of calling for ethnic cleansing. And on top of that, while we're at it, let's also just see if we can't roll in the idea of immigrants and refugees in this country as well. Really shocking.
Yeah, no, the ethnic cleansing was implicit, but like the real operational part is when she says that she said that's what the people of Gaza are. She said all of them are assassins and terrorists. So what really, really vile right-wingers do in this country is they'll say what they know they can kind of get away with. But what Michelle Bachmann really thinks is that if they're terrorists, you got to kill all of those 2 million people.
Let's take another clip, and then we will get to, we will take a phone call. This is also from the TPUSA AmFest in Phoenix, Arizona, sponsored at least in part by, we put up this screen. Mike Lindell is there. up to 80% off of everything.
Okay, so we've been tracking some of these promo codes, and 80% has got to be the most discounted percentage.
Basically free.
Yeah, I mean, he's desperate to get those pillows off the shelves.
Mike Lindell is in fire sale mode at this point. I think he's still looking at that Dominion lawsuit, and I guess the free legal advice he was getting from Rudy Giuliani has not been paying off. Apparently.
Rudy's like, I need you to pay now because I'm in the hole for 148 mil.
Yeah, he's Mike Lindell is now questioning his slander, the advice he's gotten from Rudy Giuliani on slander. But nevertheless, that's not why we're playing you this clip. Just to give you another notion of what's happening within the burgeoning conservative movement. You know, we've talked about the agenda that was involved in the overturn of Roe v. Wade, the agenda that's involved in preventing or forcing women to carry pregnancies to term, the agenda that's involved in controlling the sexuality of women is all part and parcel of a larger agenda of the conservative movement to dictate and to maintain a patriarchy, one which has a real problem with gay people. And we've heard this from other, conservative voices, and you're going to hear more and more of it as time goes on. Here's Allie Stuckey. She's a conservative commentator. I don't know where she comments.
She has like a podcast.
There she go.
Called Relatable.
She is... well, listen to her. This is something you can hear just by listening to Daily Wire on a regular basis, too.
Number 2. Are you ready? Children deserve a mom and a dad. Children are entitled to this. Now, conservatives, we're told, are not supposed to care about Obergefell anymore. The decision that redefined marriage. It did not have the power to redefine it because only God can define it because he created it in Genesis 1. But Obergefell attempted to redefine marriage legally. This is another fundamental issue on which the
now
future
pause it.
of America
Just here is the
falls.
sort of fundamental problem with what she's saying. I mean, aside from it being offensive and bigoted and whatnot. God created marriage. Let me just stipulate that that for the sake of whatever she's saying. God does not issue marriage licenses. The state does that. Civil society does that. God can create whatever God wants to create. But in terms of legal rights within the context of a civil society, that is offered by the state. The state provides marriage licenses. If God wants to marry people through God's religious people, they can do that all day long. But if they're not married under the laws of the state, they will not have the privileges that we give as a state to married people.
Which we do.
1,000+ different rights, ranging from visitation rights at hospitals to easier times in probate when someone dies and without a will, to tax benefits. I mean, on and on and on. But the whole point of these theocrats is that God's law trumps civil society. And if there is any discrepancy between civil society and what they tell us is their God's law wins.
But Obergefell attempted to redefine marriage legally. This is another fundamental issue on which the future of America rises or falls. When it comes to the trans debate, conservatives are mostly on the same page. We all agree. Women are women. Men are men. One can't be the other because men and women are biologically different and biology matters. But it doesn't just matter when it comes to sports. It doesn't just matter when it comes to gender. It matters in marriage. Marriage is meant to be, in principle, a child creating, a child rearing, a child protecting institution between the only two kinds of individuals that can make babies, a man and a woman.
Again, pause it. Now, she has to say in principle because she wants to give herself some wiggle room. But why would we give marriage licenses? Why wouldn't we revoke marriage licenses? Why wouldn't we revoke if God's vessels marry people and they don't produce children? Why don't we revoke those marriages? Why don't people divorce immediately or just automatic annulment of marriages after the kid are emancipated when they're 18 or 21? Why do we maintain marriages beyond child rearing if that is the fundamental defining principle of it?
Yeah.
It's absurd. Doesn't make any sense.
People women who are over 50 should not be able to get married under this.
Should not be able to get married, but also not stay married. I mean, once the kids leave, we should revoke all of the privileges associated with marriage if they're going to be consistent.
But men can do whatever they want, right? Because they're the ones that give life at any age. So they kind of have a privileged position in the society. They can remarry.
They can remarry.
They give life. Not
if you don't, if you don't produce the children, maybe within a certain time period, have it automatically revoked.
Just to point out how, like, at its most distilled form, it's so patriarchal.
Of course.
Institution between the only two kinds of individuals that can make babies, a man and a woman. That biology that we recognize differentiates a man and a woman also differentiates a mom and a dad. Two men may be able to be good dads, but they cannot be a mother. Two women may be able to be good moms, but they cannot be a father, and children need both. Children need their moms and their dads equally, but for different reasons and different stages. I have been incredibly blessed to have birthed and breastfed 3 children now, something my husband cannot do, which he's very thankful for. When my kids are sick or hurt or tired, they cry for me.
Oh, I find it's good to know your husband doesn't have as great of a relationship with your kids, whatever. But like, I also love I breastfed too. I breastfed because I can give life. Like, there's so many hierarchies in fundamentalist religion, and one of them too is like, who is the more godly kind of woman? The woman who can easily be a giver of life and is the more fertile. Is more fertile, right? And there are women like her that judge women that have difficulties with their own pregnancies. And so, like, when we talk about abortion in this country, and the case of Kate Cox, right, who in Texas was seeking an abortion. I believe she must have gotten it out of the state at this point, because the pregnancy was non-viable, and if the pregnancy continued, she could be hampered from having children in the future. They don't really see any problem with that, because that is God essentially saying, you must have done something wrong in your role as a woman on this planet, under God, to not be able to birth children in the natural godly way. And it's the same thing with all other exceptions for the life of the mother when it comes to the debate about abortion. They want God's natural law to play out without the satanic modern medicine getting involved. Because if a woman does die or has complications from her pregnancy, that is God's way of telling her she deserved it. And understand too that if they were able to turn the clock back on Obergefell, they would do it. They may still, frankly, attempt in some respects. But they also would have if they were given the opportunity, they would have control over the idea of divorce, and there would be covenant marriages. Maybe, I mean, if that logic is to hold, there should be forced annulment of marriages when the children have been raised, so that the man can go and squire some other offspring as God intended. I mean, that's basically where you're left. That is their vision for
America, maybe the world, but first they have to turn America into a full-on theocracy before they start to. Although I suppose you could do it, simultaneously. We have the empire now. We just need the theocracy. But
just quickly, because you mentioned trans people, we said this before on the program that going after trans people was not gonna be where they stopped.
Of course not.
They felt that they lost after Obergefell. They took a little bit of a hibernation, and now the anti-trans panic is a wedge to reopen the debate about gay marriage being legal in this country.
Kowalski from Nebraska. My dad died when I was 10 years old. I would say the positive male role model in my life were a series of very good teachers and coaches I had growing up, as well as this might be difficult for some people to wrap their heads around. My mom was pretty awesome, as it turns out. Moms know a thing or two about dads. I would presume the same in reverse. All right, let's go to the phones. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam and Emma. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. For pole position today.
Yeah. So this show has done a good job covering how the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, and the Democratic Majority for Israel, or DMFI, is going to be spending $100 million targeting black and brown candidates in the 2024 congressional Democratic primaries, after spending $30 million in 2022. Just yesterday morning, is announced that DMFI is endorsing 81 Democratic House incumbents. There are 76 days until the congressional primaries start on March 5th in California, Texas, North Carolina, Alabama, and Arkansas. The filing deadline has passed in all of these states. I'm going to focus on a few races in California where progressives have a chance of winning. California has a jungle primary where the top two candidates advance from all parties. In the Senate race, I believe Barbara Lee is the best progressive candidate. She's been consistent throughout her career, and most people remember her as the only person in the House to vote against the Patriot Act. Some people have, some people have some trepidation because she's 77 years old, but I still feel she's an effective communicator and will deliver a more consistent progressive votes than anyone else in the race. Lee's polling at 12% in the latest Survey USA poll, and this is a 3-point rise since the last poll. And I think that's because the younger voters know that Lee was one of the first legislators to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Another progressive, Katie Porter, is also at 12%. Republican Steve Garvey is at 15%, and Adam Schiff is leading at 22%. In the last two cycles, the most progressive candidates to face each other. In the general election, we're in the 34th district, which covers the downtown Los Angeles area. David Kim, who was endorsed by DSA in 2022, is running against Jimmy Gomez, who has the top 30 progressive voting record among House legislatures. In 2020, Gomez won by 6 points. In 2022, Gomez only won by 22.4. If Kim's margins continue to go down, hopefully he will win soon. Yesterday morning, Gomez was endorsed by DMFI. The 16th district covers the southwest San Francisco Bay Area and runs to South Central San Jose. Anna Eshoo has been in Congress since 1992, will be retiring. In the last two cycles, progressive Rishi Kumar has qualified for the general election. In 2020, he lost by Eshoo by 26.4%, and in 2022, he lost by 15.6. There are 6 other candidates that are running, so it's an open, unpredictable field. It's going to be interesting to see if a centrist can consolidate the vote. In the 29th district, which runs from North Hollywood to the San Fernando Valley, incumbent Tony Cardenas is retiring, and progressive Angelica Duenas is running for the 4th time in a row. In previous cycles, she's been endorsed by Our Revolution and the Sunrise Movement. She qualified for the general election in the last 2 cycles, and she lost by 13.2% in 2020 and 17 points in 2022. Assemblywoman Luz Rivas is the only other Democrat to run in the primary, and an all-Democratic general election is expected again. This district, which is 68% Hispanic. One of the biggest problems in the Democratic Party is the incumbency protection racket that protects the status quo, which makes it harder to implement real change on important topics because the establishment candidates are too dependent on big money donors who they owe favors to for their donations. The fact that no one has, with a high profile, has challenged Biden, despite his being extremely unpopular, is a terrible sign for Democrats, and I hope that will change in the future. The best thing that Biden could do for the country is to drop out and let someone else run who is fairly popular, because Democrats have a slight lead in the congressional generic ballot, but Biden is losing badly in swing state polling. I understand that it's still extremely early, and I'm not saying Biden can't win, but there are many other presidents who had a higher approval rating that have lost, according to press reports that I've read. Those candidates include Trump, George Herbert Walker Bush, Ford, and LBJ, who decided to drop out after the initial New Hampshire primary in 1968. If you have any comments or questions, I'll be happy to address them.
Well, first off, hi, John. Long time no hear from.
So good to hear from you.
That's my first comment.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think this show's really done a great job. Again, I know I called last year at the end of the year, complimenting on your coverage of unions and all the triumphs that have continued also in 2023. So you've done a great job about that, and also I think you've done a great job covering the initial October 7th attacks and the Gazan genocide that's happened after that. So
thank you, John. It's kind. I now I have some substantive questions about the polling with Biden. I mean, I think it is highly impossibly unlikely that Joe Biden is going to make a decision to not be the candidate. I know some people differ on that. I would be okay with him making that decision. I would be probably significantly happier about it because it does look like it's perilous. Do you what are the signs as you look at the polls, right? I mean, his approval rating is dismal. I don't know that anybody has ever had this type of approval rating and won as the president. But of course, he's also running against a former president, which probably cuts both ways. The fact that it's Trump hurts. What is there any place for him to get new votes from 2020? It doesn't look like right now. It looks pretty bleak. But is there any place for him to get new votes?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how many people actually show up to vote, because just the record that wasn't a total record as a percentage, but it was the highest since 1900. And women were only given the vote in 2020. Yeah, in 1920.
No, but I'm saying in 2020. Okay, you're saying 2020 numbers was a high, like a record turnout. We have really no sense of this yet, do we? I mean, because I think in 2022, it felt like Democrats did quite well despite Biden. And the question becomes will someone come out and vote against their Republican congressperson, let's say, or for their Democratic congressperson, but, leave the Biden blank, or do people just stay at home generally? And the question is, are there more Republicans or Democrats that are going to stay home because of their mutual distaste of their candidate?
Yeah, I am concerned about turnout. In 2022, the turnout wasn't as good as it was in 2018. And I do feel that the 2022 was very miscategorized by the press, because Democrats they had 8 million less votes than in 2018, and which is a 15% drop. And that's not really talked about because of all the triumphs in the swing state, let's say in the Senate races and in the governor's races and the Secretary of State's races, where it did seem like, the idea of kind of bucking authoritarianism was, really there was a very positive effect in those swing states. And so I hope that happens again. I do think that Biden really should run on, the fact that Trump is an authoritarian, because I think that is what drove the vote in 2020. I don't think people didn't show up in record numbers because they felt overwhelmingly positive for Biden.
Right.
It was mostly an anti-Trump vote, and so they should really focus on that. And even though all of the head-to-head votes are meaningless, completely meaningless because of our system of the Electoral College. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. And so, even this morning, you're seeing in the Marist poll 47-45 in likely voters, which is always more predictable than registered voters. And so, again, super early, but I mean, the idea of having people running is really what I wanted to emphasize the most. Is that there's just too much thought of we got to be united. The centrists that are essentially gaining power, and I am concerned that not enough people are running, because if you look at the other three cycles in the post after the 2016 Bernie run, at this point you had more people running, you had more people raising money, just as Democrats,
You're
obviously
talking
had to
about
lay off
primary
people.
challengers.
Right, we're talking about primary challengers, and I would like to, I'd like to see more people, and there's still plenty of time right now. Right now, there are only 6 states that actually had their congressional filing deadlines, finished, and so I still hope that can happen. But I mean, I know that also, most people are focusing on, can the squad actually hold their seats, from challenges from Jamal Bowman and Ilhan Omar, Summer Lee, and so those are going to be important races too. And I do think they can win those races still, despite
I do
a ton
too.
of money. Yeah,
I do too. I don't think. I mean, these are the advantage. I think that the incumbency has for squad members is that they are almost necessarily connected to their communities in a way that people like, Crowley wasn't. And so because of their very nature of the way that they won in the first instance, they,
and the nature of the district, in the sense that I think that, the you're going to have more progressive voters in these like urban, safe blue districts, at least when it comes to AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, representing cities that are going to be more in tune with that kind of money coming in from AIPAC.
And the question is, are they going to come out? And I think because of the nature and the way that these people won their first seats, it's more likely that their supporters are motivated. But we'll see. All right, last question, John, and it's got to be quick because we got to jump. You say you want Joe Biden to retire. Okay, I mean I don't think that's going to happen. But let's say it did. How do you envision, who would be the candidate that you think would be the strongest, and how would that process unfold? It wouldn't be a clean type of situation, right? Because there would be a significant portion of the Democratic Party. I don't know what portion that would be. That would say it's obviously got to be Kamala Harris. And I, personally, not terribly interested in that outcome. I imagine there's a lot of people who would not want that outcome, but there's also a lot of people who would. Play it out for me. It's not just a generic Democrat that would replace Biden. That person would actually have to be a person, and they would have to go through a process that might be fracturing as well. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. That would happen. And the unfortunate thing is that kind of Biden rigged this thing to where filing deadlines are. There's already been about 20 filing deadlines that have passed in the presidential race, And so what you're saying is actually harder to envision than even you're imagining. But,
right.
But yeah, I mean, it would be a wide open field, just like it was in 2020. And you would have Newsom and you'd have Whitmer. And
would it be a wide open field like it was in 2020 because there wasn't an incumbent vice president?
Yeah, that's true, but I just don't think that Harris has enough of a grip on the electorate. I mean,
no, I agree with you. I agree with you in that respect. But I'm just saying there is a portion of the Democratic Party that would be like, hey, wait a second. When was the last time this happened?
And she's a black woman, and what that means for passing her over, Yeah,
I think that she would run, but I just don't think that she would have the support immediately, and that people would come into the race. I just think it's inevitable. I mean,
so who do you think would be the strongest candidate coming out of all of it? Last word.
Well, I would hope Bernie, but I mean,
no.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Well, I mean,
he's not going to run.
I still have some hope for let's say Warren or Whitmer. I mean, I think Whitmer has a lot of intangibles that people like. And I think she's done some good things recently. I mean, it's not ideologically my favorite candidate, but, I do think that she has a lot of appeal to people, and she has done better in polls than Biden in head-to-head.
John from San Antonio, always great to hear from you.
All right. Thanks, you.
Man.
Have a good New Year.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. That was very fortuitous.
Interesting, just because I also think like the thirstiest person to take it is Newsom, who wants to run is Newsom, obviously. I don't think he would be a bad candidate, but then you also have Pritzker.
Oh, I don't think the guy less sanguine on Newsom.
The guy who I would like to run, but I don't think will, but primarily because of his age too, is Tim Walz, who's the governor of Minnesota. He's, I think, one of the better messengers of Democratic policy. He's while they're banning books, we're
all
ending
fantastical.
Hunger. Yeah.
No, all of what we're talking about
absolutely.
is fantastic.
I agree.
He's also 72, so I wouldn't want him to run anyways.
No, I mean,
in that regard, in terms of
he's almost 10 years younger than Biden.
Are you
spring chicken?
Are you frustrated by this conversation because it's about nothing that's going to actually happen in reality? Yeah, I hear you.
I mean, I just think that
the only way it happens is if there's a more permanent outcome for Biden. I don't mean to be cynical when I say that, but that's the
correct. Correct. And then God knows what happens because you won't have the opportunity. Maybe at that point, I mean, if it was to happen in the next week, you'd have 5 of those states who reopen their deadlines maybe. But if we're talking, 3 months, 6 months, I mean, what
if Biden died in June,
my anxiety level goes too high when I start to think about this stuff. And since he should have made this decision, the imaginary decision I wanted him to make, a year ago, but even a year and a half ago, you could have the argument of we're a year and a half out. You can't, you don't know how dismal the polling. In a year, let's talk in January of 2024 what the polling looks like. Oh, well, it turns out it looks as bad as it's looked, if not worse. Okay. Let's just... we are less than a month out from January 6th. There'll be a lot of looking back on January 6th. Fascinating story. This is one of the most interesting stories about that. I think the reason why I put this, talk about this story, because it is the most explicit, simplistic example of putting to lie the idea that there wasn't some plan afoot in terms of the presidency and storming the Capitol. Right? Because we've been told that it was, and the president, the former president, Trump has said this, there was a rally and people just happened to march without planning down to the Capitol. And There has
Trump-
been
okay.
on Monday, the Inspector General of the Interior Department released a 47-page report. They're in charge of the permitting process for the rally that took place that Donald Trump addressed. And the rally was applied for by Women for America First, which, surprisingly, because it's a conservative organization, is actually run by women.
What?
I know that's shocking.
Women can be fashy too.
Well, but my point is that
No, I'm aware.
I have debated
I'm aware, yes.
head of Concerned Women of America, and his name I can't remember, but
Yes.
it was a he.
Yes.
So they organized the Save America rally in Washington on January 6th. They lied on multiple occasions to the permitting guy of the national park when signing up for their permit, saying they are not going to march to the Capitol. Now, you can say, well, maybe they didn't lie. Maybe they didn't know that they were going to march to the Capitol, and that's been the whole argument, right? Well, according to the investigation, Women for America First repeatedly told Park Service officials there would be no march to the Capitol while privately planning for one. When shown private text messages indicating there would be a march, a park ranger involved in the permitting process told investigators it, quote, blew her mind. The Park Service had repeatedly asked Women for America First whether there would be a march, and the organization, quote, was just adamant there was going to be no march. So it turns out that a White House liaison sent text messages on January 3rd from Women to America First regarding a demonstration at the Ellipse. That's where the first speech went. POTUS expectations are intimate, and then, so we're going to have a small rally, and then send everyone over to the Capitol, the message said. And that was from Katrina Pearson. Katrina Pearson, in addition, they had the White House liaison. Katrina Pearson, who was a Trump spokeswoman, sent an email the day before with nearly identical language. Also, on January 3rd, Women for America First, which had received a permit on January 1 for a 5,000-person rally, expanded the number of attendees to 30,000 while continuing to deny Park Service officials there would be a march. On January 4th, Kylie Jane Kremer, who was one of the two women who started Women for America First, quote, POTUS is going to have us march there at the Capitol, she added. This is pretty explicit.
Yes.
But then she goes on to say, it can also not get out about the march because I will be in trouble with the National Park Service and all the agencies, but POTUS is going to just call for it, quote, unexpectedly.
Okay, so this is essentially a document or a transcript where it says, I am going to do the crime. I'm knowing that I'm going to do the crime, or I'm lying. I know I'm lying, and that I am lying at the behest of Donald Trump's office.
I would add, and my understanding is the president has already formed an alibi for this act.
Right.
Which is that it's just going to be called for unexpectedly.
We are lying in tandem with one another.
Yep. And so this, now, of course, the guy's already been, but I would imagine we're going to hear about this in lawsuits, that we may see from like Capitol Police who were injured. This is going to open up, I think, Trump to maybe some other legal liability and to others, obviously. But it is also really puts to lie, and I think people already knew this was a lie, but this is pretty explicit. I mean, they're already talking about the alibi that's going to cover for the lie, not just that they perpetrated on the park ranger service, but that the president was going to use. They're already aware of what the president's alibi was going to be.
It's amazing. And this is instructive, too, about when you're consuming like right-wing content and you're trying to understand how they operate in the press. they're always doing doublespeak when it comes to like regular standard conservatives, activist groups like this, where they're saying one thing to the people that they need to say this to in order to get over the finish line, and privately expressing their intentions, or whether it goes to like white supremacists who know exactly what to say and dog whistles that they say in public while behind the scenes they want to say like kill all the XYZ minority groups. They know that they can't, as a minoritarian movement, win people over, and this is a very broad analysis of this, but they're lying in service of their agenda is like inherent to political activism on the right.
So with that said, we have seen, through these text messages about the setting up of the initial rally on January 6th, right? We know that the organizers lied to the Park Service about the intentions. We know that they knew that the president was going to pretend that this was an unexpected event, that people were going to march down to the Capitol. And then the question becomes like, okay, why were they hiding the fact that there was going to be a march down to the Capitol? Why did the president already have a pre-established alibi as to why they were marching down to the Capitol? Because at the other end of the Capitol, there was a plan that was orchestrated out of the White House and involved certain senators and certain congresspeople, and then back in their home states in fake electors, to essentially overturn the election. And Rudy Giuliani is going to pay $150 million because he lied about, in service of that conspiracy, in service of that, he lied about election workers in Georgia. And we know that, Fox News had to pay money because they were lying about the voting machines. And so we see all that. Here is Caitlin Collins. You'll remember last week, she was talking to Ron Johnson, the second dumbest senator in the Senate, only because of Tommy Tuberville's win, about the fake electors and his involvement in all of that. Because he was supposed to be like working with the vice president. Mm-hmm. And he said, Democrats have done that many times before. And she said, when? And he said, well, check the books. And she's like, what book? And
he said, my office will get back to you.
And here they got back to her, and she's following up on that. And this was late last week.
Johnson may not have read the books that he told us to check very closely. He was here on the show Monday night, and when he was asked a pretty simple question, should someone who tried to overturn the last election be involved in overseeing the next one, the Wisconsin Republican said this. Which
Democrats
one?
have done the same thing.
In
Republicans never
Wisconsin,
tried
there's
to
been
criminalize it.
fake slates of electors?
No, it's happened in different states. I didn't come prepared to give you the exact states, but it's happened repeatedly. It has happened repeatedly. Just go check the books.
Which books?
I mean, there have been alternate slates of electors by Democrat electors in our history. Again, this wasn't what this interview was going to be about. I'll come and I'll provide you the information.
I look forward to your office sending that information. We'll publish it if it's accurate. So he followed up on Twitter, listed the 4 examples that you see here, none of which proved his point. Democrats have not repeatedly used alternate slates of electors. None even come close to what Republicans did in 2020. Really, just one of the examples he cites even is relevant to this. There's some big differences, so I'll tell you what they are. The senator is pointing to the 1960 election, something that we have seen Republicans bring up repeatedly since Trump lost in 2020. That year, Democrats in Hawaii sent an alternative slate of electors to Congress. Vice President Richard Nixon at the time and John F. Kennedy, they were nearly tied in the state. But here, the facts about what happened next are critical. At the time, a recount was still underway, one that ultimately flipped the results from Nixon to Kennedy. A judge would rule that the Kennedy electors were legitimate. And I should note that when Kennedy was ultimately the winner in the final count in Hawaii, it was Nixon himself, as vice president, who presided over the session approving that slate of electors instead of his own on January 6, 1961. In 2020, meanwhile, the recount in Wisconsin was over. It showed that Biden did indeed win Senator Ron Johnson's home state. Wisconsin's alternate GOP electors met more than 2 weeks after that recount and still signed a false certificate of electors. Trump and his supporters, of course, would go on to lose 7 more lawsuits in Wisconsin related to the electors. The other examples on Senator Johnson's list are instances where Democrats voiced objection to the election results. Not exactly instances of plots to overturn an election that was affirmed by recounts and by the courts. But even if you disagree with what those Democrats did, most importantly here, those instances went nowhere because the candidates who lost those elections conceded them. Of course, Senator Ron Johnson's role in this has also come under scrutiny, given the text messages showing that his chief of staff was trying to deliver a, quote, alternate slates of electors for Michigan and Wisconsin directly to Vice President Pence on January 6th, something that will surely be included in the history books.
There you go. I added the Law and Order drop. I just want you to know they did not do that on CNN.
Some staff
that would have been
intern, said we got to, the vice president needs this or whatever. Again, I wasn't involved. I don't know what they said, so I don't know why you're even asking the question.
There you go. There's Ron Johnson trying to
leave me alone.
Leave me alone. Ron Johnson talking about stuff that's so common he needed to check with somebody who could back it up and then couldn't come up with anything. So there it is.
Satisfying.
That was satifying.
Good job, Caitlin
Let's take a quick phone call. Calling from a 407 area code. Who's this? Where you're calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
This is Malcolm from, I'm from Florida, but I'm currently in Cambridge. I am I'm going to put myself out there. I'm a Harvard student.
Okay.
I wanted to just call and talk to you about what's been going on here.
Okay.
Dude, what's happening in Cambridge?
Yeah. Way to brag, but no, joking.
So I think a lot of the big problems is I will completely acknowledge how there are some students who feel like their Jewish identity might be under threat during campus. But my big problem is that there's barely any reporting being done on how the different organizations that signed on to the resolutions in support of Palestine have had their names put out there on that truck. There's been multiple attempts.
Wait. People may not know what truck you're talking about. They signed this document, and then there was a truck that was sent around that actually had a big sort of electronic screen, right?
Yeah, with the faces of the kids that signed that letter, and it was also funded by a right-wing think tank.
Yes. And there's that, and there's also the fact that a lot we saw you reported on the incident where that graduate student was being yelled at by the wife of the professor. We just haven't seen those kinds of incidents when it comes to anti-Semitism on this campus so far. And I was actually very scared when the writer Viet Thanh Nguyen came and he claimed that Palestine was being under genocide. I was afraid that he was probably going to see repercussions on campus.
And so is there anybody what's happening on campus in terms of pushing back?
Well, we've had plenty of pro-Palestinian protests. They've draped the John Harvard statue in a list of names of killed Palestinians. And I think a big thing that I've noticed is there's a difference in character between the pro-Israeli and the pro-Palestinian protests or demonstrations. It feels like the pro-Israeli demonstrations don't really advocate for any solutions. Rather, instead, they seem to be more virtue signals, essentially.
They are,
Does that make any sense?
I think I follow what you're saying there, but elaborate.
So basically, the main thrust of the pro-Palestinian movement on campus at the moment is simply ceasefire now. Whereas the biggest demonstration that I remember that by students that was pro-Israeli was a table representing the missing hostages, but especially seeing how those 3 men were tragically shot by the IDF, it seems like the best real solution for those hostages is a ceasefire, right, rather than the just posting their names everywhere. They were all across campus. We've had photos of the hostages put up and saying with different sayings, saying Hamas is responsible for this. Do not support anti-Semitism. But I feel like there's no solution being put forward there.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, aside from the fact that the rules for engagement for the IDF in terms of shooting at people who are unarmed and waving a white flag and not wearing a shirt to make it clear that they're not bombed up, aside from the fact that it suggests that the IDF was just shooting whatever moves in front of them, it also clearly demonstrates that the safest way to get the hostages out of there is via a ceasefire. Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I would have gotten into it, because you go to the Plow and Stars, you go to these different bars, and but I didn't want to do that.
But we got stuff to get to.
We got stuff to get to. Let's see, 1, 9, or 15.
One might be an easy transition from that conversation, but up to you.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, we should do this one. This is on Meet the Press this weekend. And this is Shaquille Brewster spoke to Adam Absallah, an activist in Michigan who campaigned for Biden ahead of the 2020 election. I think, it would be a mistake.
Oh, Sam, sorry. I didn't, that one I wanted to get more verification on, if you recall.
Okay.
This is the first version of the one was about the church in Gaza.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. We, all right. That was number 2. Clip number 2. Yes. All right. Let's play this. This is, on, Leading Britain's Conversation, LBC. I'm not sure this show. Oh, yeah, no, I've seen this show a little bit. And we have just seen, this is sort of shocking at this point. It makes me wonder what kind of coverage is going on there, because we had a former American congressman, Justin Amash, lose family who were in a church because part of the church was bombed in Gaza early on.
Yep.
And subsequent to that, at the very least, in the past couple of days, there's been a lot of images in fact, I think the Pope even spoke out about sniper attacks on churchgoers in Gaza.
They killed a woman and a child, I think.
The Pope is an international figure, incidentally.
Is he a Christian?
And he is, I believe, a part of a Christian movement called Catholicism.
Look that up, Bradley.
Bradley, check that out. In the meantime, here is, this is sort of shocking. Play this clip. I just wonder,
this person speaking is the deputy mayor of Jerusalem.
If a ceasefire means the return of the hostages and the dismantlement of a genocidal regime that has stated that they're going to attack us again, then everybody would be in favor of a ceasefire. But if a ceasefire means that we're just going to keep them quiet for a bit until they attack again, then it's Israel's obligation to defend its citizens and destroy that threat, don't you think?
Why is it necessary, it is reported, to start shooting, having snipers outside a church?
I saw the reports this morning. The church, there are no churches in Gaza, so I'm not quite sure where the report is talking about.
There's a Catholic church in there, isn't there? That is.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are no Christians because they were driven out by.
Well, respectfully, there are Christians, because I spoke to an MP yesterday who has family members in the church who are Christians.
Well, I don't know what happened. I don't know who was attacked. I didn't see the report.
That is, and I've actually saw that on Twitter. The member of parliament was actually live tweeting what was going on with her family in this church, and the snipers attacking members of her family. And the idea,
it's a lie.
I think she really doesn't know.
Yeah.
She didn't know that there were churches there. She didn't know that there were Christians in those churches. And it begs the question, how do you call for a unrelenting attack on civilians in an area that you supposedly are so convinced that you know what the agenda of these people are, and not know some of these basic facts that are The Pope called for them to stop sniping at these people. It is insane.
We played on Thursday last week. Here we go. This is what you were referring to, Sam.
Yeah, this is a member of Parliament, Layla Moran, tweeting out about her family who are sheltering in this church in Gaza City.
Yeah, I mean, we played this clip of this young settler who had completely had his mind changed when he was, it went viral on TikTok, when he was at a university and they had an exchange program with a Palestinian who came and spoke about the checkpoints and how long it took him to get into this university just to beg these folks to see his humanity, and how he had absolutely no idea and no concept until he went with that Palestinian man over the border that these people, A, were not just immediately going to kill him, and B, what the conditions were like over there. Israeli society has been so hermetically sealed from the realities of what's happening over there in Gaza that even the deputy mayor of Jerusalem, the holy city, which, by the way, you can only be elderly as a Palestinian to even go to Jerusalem. Many Palestinians haven't even seen Jerusalem, which is mere miles from where they live. Also discussed in that video by the settler. It's just amazing how effective that indoctrination and the propaganda has been at that point. So who knows if she's lying or if she actually believes it, and I'm not exactly sure what is worse at that point.
It's impossible to know what's worse. But I actually think she believed it, which just shows you the durability, the scope, and the depth of how ignorant the Israelis are, and the indoctrination that's associated with what their own country is doing to people who are miles away from them.
Yeah, and last thing on that point, if she did know and was knowingly lying, there's also the piece where Zionists within Israel are very afraid if the Western folks, and including Christian Zionists and Christians, start to identify a little bit more with the Palestinian people, and getting the idea out there that Christians are also dying in this instance might aid that. I'm not sure.
The Christians,
well, they won't care. Okay,
you heard Michelle Bachmann. She said basically get rid of all 2 million.
A few Christians that aren't insane Republican psychos, maybe.
Let's go to clip number 8. This is funny because it's Rudy Giuliani. It's also not funny because of the incredible, just travails that Rudy Giuliani has caused these 2 Georgia election workers to go through. Here is Rudy Giuliani, and we should say that he has now been sued again. We reported, I guess was it Monday? It was yesterday, right? Giuliani got it was found that he was liable for $148 million in his defamation suit filed by 2 election workers. I can't find her name now. Oh yeah, Ruby Freeman and her daughter, and Shay Moss.
Yeah.
And so they won a $148 million verdict against Giuliani. He says, I'm going to be able to get over this because I wasn't able to give evidence, whatever
that they
it was.
were passing around USB vials, like vials of heroin and cocaine is what he claimed they were doing.
So Giuliani follows up by realizing, I'm done. I'm cooked. They can't get any more money out of me. This is what he's thinking. They can't get any more money out of me. So what I got to do is go get on television to raise more money for me. And the only way I can do that is to repeat the original claims that I did. Here is what he went out and did last night. And then I'll tell you what happened this morning.
Based on my not turning over financial documents. Number 2, I had evidence that I wanted to present both on liability and then later on damages. We wanted to present the evidence to show that I had a basis for what I said. A very detailed tape recording, another detailed tape recording, several witnesses, a report done by the Georgia Senate.
Do you allege that your allegations, your initial allegations, you still believe them to be true?
Yeah, well, of course they'll sue me again for it when I say that, but yeah, I do. But they want me to lie. They basically are suing me in order to lie to them. I'm sorry, I can't do it. If I showed you the evidence right now, and I think you've played it on your air, people would see that what I said was absolutely true, and there's support for it. And the most important thing is it doesn't have to be absolutely true.
Cut him off.
It has to be supportable. They have to prove that I was deliberately lying, which I wasn't. I had all this material that I based it on. And never got a chance to make that defense to the jury. This was the most outrageous case I've ever heard of.
It's. I mean, obviously the verdict and the damages.
Don't say any more on our air because Newsmax doesn't want to go.
Rob Schmidt have done this on Newsmax.
Yeah. You also lied about Dominion and Smartmatic, who are involved in multi-billion-dollar lawsuits.
You remember that, right?
So there's a new suit that has asked for a court injunction that would prohibit Giuliani from continuing to make his election-related allegations against Freeman and Moss, who are mother and daughter. We should say this: the jury verdict came down Friday, I guess it was, and the complaint does not explicitly seek monetary damages, although the paperwork filed with the case says it's seeking relief worth more than $75,000. So this is like it's. Relative to the $148 million, it's not going to be that much, but it's going to be harder for, I think, Giuliani to sort of fight this one because he's now got to make a cost-benefit analysis, it strikes me. Maybe it's just not worth it. But there he is. He's going out and he's doing the only thing he can, doubling down. And I guess the strategy, if I had to guess, is maybe if I showed that I'm absolutely adamant that I was speaking the truth, then I can get off by saying that I had no malintent in this defamation. But I remind you, these people were not public figures until Giuliani made them public figures. They were just election, workers. It really is amazing. Militant Apathy on the IM says, every single case that Giuliani ever presented, every conviction needs to be reviewed. I think that's a pretty good
yeah.
Let's do...
Want to do number 14, the Eric Adams one?
Oh, yes. We'll do one more quick one. Eric Adams, who, this guy's entire sort of I think... daily affirmation must be just look innocent. Just look innocent. Don't let them see you sweat. Don't let them see you sweat. And that is because he is under at least one investigation. I think, has he had his cell phone taken at this point?
I'm not sure, but very much in hot water over this campaign finance turkey scheme.
The FBI has seized his phones in early November.
That's so amazing. His approval rating, I think it was Quinnipiac, but one of the more respected pollsters said his approval rating is the lowest it's been since they started recording and looking at New York City mayors that any mayor has had for decades.
Here he is on PX11's Dan Manarino asking Mayor Eric Adams how he'd describe the year 2023. And I wonder if he was sort of practicing this, or he's going to blame it on somebody or something.
When you look at the totality of the year, if you had to describe it, and it's tough to do, in one word, what would that word be, and tell me why?
New York. This is a place where every day you wake up, you could experience everything from a plane crashing into our trade center to a person who's celebrating a new business that's open. This is a
Those are pretty disparate things.
And that's why
I think the latter probably happened in 2023. The former had not happened for 22 years. Rudy Giuliani was famous for basically campaigning on Noun, verb, 9/11.
Yep.
And talk about the last refuge. New York, anything could happen. Terrorist attack, which incidentally did not happen, or somebody opened up a new business. Keep going. Is there any more to that?
It's the city that never sleeps.
I'll see if I can find a little bit.
Oh, can we do this? And now, can we hear what that sounds like in Turkish?
I'm trying to find
Okay, we're going to try and play it in Turkish because just so that some of his more prominent
friends,
benefactors and friends will be able to understand Eric Adams.
Friends in the Harlem
Do we have it?
vein.
Let's try it.
Oh, no, I was just going to play it.
We don't have it? Okay, let's just replay it and see where he goes with this.
When you look at the totality of the year, if you had to describe it, and it's tough to do, in one word, what would that word be, and tell me why?
New York. This is a place where every day you wake up, you could experience everything from a plane crashing into our trade center to a person who's celebrating a new business that's open. This is a very, very complicated city, and that's why it's the greatest city on the globe.
Mm-hmm. When you look at the totality of the year.
It's raining.
He could have, he didn't have many options. He could have said corrupt, but then it wouldn't be clear on who was, or going to prison is maybe 2 words.
So is New York. No, that's 3 words.
New York is 3 words?
No, you said going to prison is 3 words.
Yeah.
But he said New York in response to 1 word.
Well, I don't know. Is it officially 2 words? It's like a name.
All right, whatever. We don't need to get into the semantics of it, but that's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. How is he invoking 9/11 over 20 years out?
I gotta say, his aides are probably like, listen, if you get any question that is even remotely that self-reflective, I would say 9/11. That's what I would probably say. That's what he's been told.
Yeah.
All right. We out of time? We tried to get it in Turkish. We couldn't do it.
Yeah, I sent a request. I'm just waiting for
the
response.
That takes too long. I can't do it immediately. Should we do this? We can do the War on Christmas tomorrow.
We'll do that tomorrow.
All right. Folks, a lot of people have held on to the phone calls. Sorry, we have run out of time. Zero Summer. 9/11 is what makes America great. JD, the physicist. Sam, I got 3 words for you. Poker with the boys. That is, of course, for Hugo's Burgers. Sam, can I get a shofar from my man Dan Swerdlove, being the best soundbite of the year on the Dan Swerdlove podcast? Hold on, let me look in the camera. Dan, Sam Seder here. Congratulations, you're a good man, and I'm wishing you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Cheers, my dude. Love you.
Good job.
Snarkorsky. When I think of New York, I think of Broadway, horrific disasters, falafel, things of that nature. Alexis JS85, the spectrum of experience in New York, according to Eric Adams. 9/11 to opening a new bodega. Maryland socialist. It's anti-Italian to think Mayor Giuliani would allow another 9/11 to happen. Jimmy Hoffa, I'm pretty sure for Giuliani to appeal his judgment, he has to put up a bond for the 148 million. That seems like tricky. Congressional baseball fan. Sam, you probably don't know, but ashwagandha, which you mentioned yesterday, is one of the aphrodisiac mushrooms. So congratulations to all of MR's staff, significant others. Militant apathy. Pootie Tang.
Thanks.
All right, let's go into read a couple more of these. Sushi poker with the boys. I've never actually seen someone's face literally shrink the older they get. Charlie Kirk is truly a special case. International socialist. Sam, MR crew. Happy holidays. Great year of MR. Now, Sam, does the advertising say anything about demographics of folks tuning into MR? Left-wing 50-something, dope-smoking coffee addicts, insomniacs with poor nutrition, bad wardrobes, big stomachs, sweet tooths, and non-too-clean bottoms. I don't know. If the shoe fits, I don't know what to tell you, folks. Bug-chasing Sam. Aside from policy, the primary difference I see between leftist liberals is the liberal attachment to the grand myths of America that your guest was discussing. Bug-chasing Sam. My boss has a whoopsie soundbite as their text message notification. I'm going to ask them if it's Tim Pool's next time I see them. Damien, do you think it's useful to always differentiate between Israeli Zionism and Christian Zionism? One is about creating an ethno-state. The other is fulfillment of a magic doomsday spell. Well, the ethno-state is the one that supposedly will allow that doomsday spell to happen. So I think it probably helps from a political standpoint. Angela from Alberta. I messaged last week about the open letter to the University of Alberta President and Vice Provost. It's been delivered. We're hoping for a dialogue that addresses the pro-censorship approach to the President of the University and the concerns of students, staff, and faculty who are against the genocide of Palestinians. Keep us updated on that. Duncan Dita Hostop. This woman is a psycho. I'm not sure which one that was, but...
Michelle Bachmann?
Could have been anybody. Could have been the other one, too.
The Jerusalem lady?
Eddie Munster telling us what they're going after once Trump wins a second term and replaces more justices. And let's see. We'll do two more. Tuck City. LBC is fantastic. My favorite host is theirs is James O'Brien. Yes, we've seen that. And he's come out with a book recently. He'd be an awesome guest sometime if you could get him. His coverage of Israel has been fantastic. And the final IM of the day. Al Conniption. Squire, some children, please. Bradley, great job today, flying solo. Emma, great job today. Matt, hope your travels are going well. Dave, great to have you here. Folks, we'll see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in and out